The mainstream media are off again, pumping out lies and yet more Project Fear in relation to Brexit and the coronavirus, completely missing the blindingly obvious so they can promote the EU's agenda, which would be to subjugate this country to be essentially a vassal state to the EU, much like the SNP want with Scotland in relation to their so-called independence. Well, today we had the Ramoning rag The Guardian releasing an editorial opinion on Brexit and the apparent dangers posed by it during our so-called greatest vulnerability, forgetting of course the absolute disaster that is the European Union's response to this. So let's check out what it had to say. It headlines The Observer View on the danger posed by Brexit during our greatest vulnerability. The transition must be extended. Even Boris Johnson knows that, although he won't admit it, which is a completely false statement. It mustn't be extended for reasons I've outlined before, like paying for the bailouts of every single European Union country that has suffered during the coronavirus crisis, which will be all 27. Remember, as I've said before, and so have many others, we will be paying back that if we're still a member of the European Union via extending the transition period. You won't hear that once from this Guardian article, obviously though. For months, Boris Johnson and his band of hard Tory Brexiteers talked of virtually nothing else. It was as though the moment on the 31st of January when Britain left the EU was the only thing in the world that mattered. It marked for them the climax of an opportunist project that shook up Europe's political landscape, brought a big election victory, and confirmed Boris Johnson's ascendancy. It's now painfully clear, as the government struggles to defeat the coronavirus pandemic, that Britain is paying a heavy price for the Brexit distraction in the early weeks of 2020. Johnson and senior ministers were simply not paying sufficient attention as the virus rapidly migrated from China to these shores, which is partly true I suppose, though it wasn't Brexit. I expect Boris Johnson's inaction was because he would have been called a racist and who knows what else had he taken drastic measures in early January like I had suggested. You know, shutting down the borders and things like that. The very second he would have done that, you would have had Labour and the media screaming from the rooftops about how he was racist because he shut the borders to stop it getting in the country. He may also have had other reasons for not taking action that I am not aware of, but I'm pretty sure it's got nothing to do with Brexit or the distraction around it in the early weeks of 2020. And let's be honest, if he would have taken drastic action earlier on in this situation, the Guardian, Labour and the rest of these snivelling shitweasels would have been running around calling him a bigoted dictator, much like they did when he tried to shut down Parliament last year. It seems rather ridiculous them moaning about that, considering them themselves would never have wanted him to take drastic action. I'm pretty sure actually The Guardian was one of the papers that was saying he shouldn't lock down early on in this situation. But now it can be used as a political beating stick against the government and the Conservative Party. The Guardian are all for it, I guess. That assertion is officially denied, of course. To admit otherwise would be a resignation matter. No, it's just stupidity. But there is good reason to believe Johnson et al. Were more concerned with whether Big Ben's bongs would welcome Brexit's dawn than ensuring Britain's health and social services were prepared and equipped to deal with the looming emergency. No, I think you'll find he was probably more concerned with running the country and stupidly believed what the WHO had to say in relation to the situation, which I think a fair few countries have done. Brexit continues to be an unwelcome, unnecessary and damaging distraction today. Many, including this newspaper, believe it always was. So, you believe it's an unwelcome, unnecessary and damaging distraction. No one else does, just you Ramoning losers. That does not surprise us in the slightest, and once again, does not mean that Brexit should be delayed any further. Let's be honest, we should have already left. And, like I've said earlier, there are various reasons it's going to be good we're out of the European Union once this situation is finally over. The Guardian, of course, would rather you continued paying the EU's debts. The difference now is those same Tory Brexiteers who could barely contain their glee in January do not want to discuss it either. even for them, Brexit has become a problematic embarrassment. No, they probably don't want to discuss it because the job is done. They're having little trade talks now, which ain't going very far. We're likely to leave on a WTO Brexit, and as I've said in previous videos recently, that is likely going to be the best outcome for this country. I'm pretty sure the Tory Brexiteers have not changed their mind on leaving the European Union. In fact, this situation has probably reinforced it. Take a look at the way the EU have acted since it started. It's not hard to discern why this article continues. What sane government at this time of unprecedented economic, financial, social and human distress would deliberately risk further massive disruption to vital trade, business investment and security lifelines? Yeah, because like I've said already, the EU are a shining light of progress and something we need to stick to after this situation. Considering they are going to have a massive debt bill relating to this situation, like I've said many times, us getting out is going to be the greatest thing that ever happened. The people of this country will be thanking the 17.4 million people who voted to leave the EU in 2016 when this is all said and done, and we've avoided paying the EU bailouts. Yet, thanks to the Brexiteers, this second catastrophe, a calamity of choice, is racing towards us like a runaway train loaded with explosives. Wow, there's a lot of disaster, doom and gloom in that little sentence there. Talks in Brussels, postponed due to the coronavirus, resumed last week with a bold statement by David Frost, the UK lead negotiator, that Britain would not seek to extend the transition period that ends on the 31st of December. What that means in reality is, absent of divine act of intervention or last-minute climb down, Britain is getting set to jump off a no-deal cliff at its moment of greatest vulnerability. So there it is, the disaster of the so-called no-deal Brexit cliff edge. I do love when they use that term, like it actually holds any weight with anyone other than the die-hard Ramonin readers. Most people probably won't even see this article, and the ones that do will, like me, just mock it for its stupidity. Take these uncomfortable facts, for instance. Uncomfortable fact 1. There is limited capacity and even less inclination among EU leaders to divert efforts and resources amid an extraordinary crisis. Yeah, they don't like diverting effort and resources to help countries like Italy and Spain, who are currently in need of desperate help in relation to the coronavirus. So, we know there's limited capacity for them to do anything relating to the Brexit trade deal. We simply don't care. Take a look at what they're doing to the countries that are still part of the Union, and could well not be after this situation is over. We hope anyway. There is limited capacity and even less inclination among EU leaders to divert effort and resources amid an extraordinary crisis into a rush negotiation just to suit Johnson's artificial timetable, as Michel Barnier made clear on Friday. The Germans, who will hold the EU Council presidency from July, have already indicated as much. Berlin's focus, rightly, will be on Europe's reconstruction, not Britain's self-destruction. Can you believe this nonsense? Britain's self-destruction, yeah? We'll soon see what the European Union's like after this situation is over, and they're still bickering about how they're gonna pay it back and who's paying how much at what, while we just have to take care of number one, ourselves. We won't have to divert precious effort and resources into helping other countries. We can just do it for ourselves. The Guardian will never tell you that though, because the European Union must be paying the bills or something. That's why at the bottom of every one of their articles, they're always begging for donations. Britain's negotiating positions are inflexible due to the point of obtuseness. No, they are inflexible simply because the people of this country democratically decided that was what we wanted. Barnier singled out fisheries, but there are deep differences across the board. Yes, because the UK people have spoken, the government appears to be sticking to it and possibly delivering a Brexit closer to what people actually voted for. The EU's chief negotiator complained Britain was dragging its feet, pointing out that doing so made the December deadline even less practical. It makes a WTO Brexit very practical in December, though. The very real possibility that Johnson actually has no coherent plan at all does not appear to have occurred to Barnier. He should consider it. No, Boris Johnson likely has a plan. He knows he holds the trump cards, especially with this situation here. So, play hardball, get what you want, or if that don't work, you leave on WTO terms, and it will probably be a better deal for the UK in the end. Uncomfortable fact number 3. A no-deal crash looms large because there is almost certainly not enough time to achieve the most rudimentary, bare-bones free trade agreement if one were on offer, or even to fully implement last year's withdrawal agreement. Any transition extension must be agreed by the 30th of June. After that, in EU and British law, there is no going back. The chasm beckons. So there we have it again. Their uncomfortable fact is a no-deal crash, which they obviously don't know will happen, considering none of them have a crystal ball, as we all heard from Project Fear before, that, guess what, never materialised. This is not a policy, it's a charlatan's farce. These are not the acts of responsible, sensible political leaders. Brexit was always a largely delusional, dishonest project. Now it's entering the realms of fantasy and nightmare by persisting as though nothing has changed. Johnson, Dominic Raab and the rest risk untold additional damage to the country already desperately struggling to survive the pandemic. No, that is nonsense. Staying in the EU will be far worse a nightmare than any WTO or hard Brexit car crash your little fantasy land can dream up. Given the disaster that has befallen us all, the only rational course is to swiftly apply for a Brexit extension of at least 1 year, and preferably 2. No, we are not staying in there for 1 year or 2 years at the end of the day. We are not continuing to pay £1.2 billion a month to the EU, along with, like I've said, having to help them bail each other out, which, if we extend the transition period, we will. Agree additional budget contributions and actively cooperate with the EU on measures to rebuild a pan-European economy that remains vital for UK prosperity. Which is essentially the Guardian saying, make sure you continue paying to the EU because they can't do it without you, and our European masters are demanding your help so the project doesn't fold. Hell no, the government can never agree to this, and by the looks of it won't. I find it quite amazing though that a British newspaper is actively promoting a foreign entity's policies and agenda, pushing it to the UK taxpayer, essentially telling them you should be paying for this, you should be paying for that. The cheek of these people is unreal. It's plain, despite the denials, that Brexiteers' disdain for such cooperation lay behind the lethal failure to join an EU purchasing scheme for protective clothing and ventilators. Have you seen what's going on in the EU at the moment? They are in a worse situation than we are. Why would we want to join something and be a part of that ourselves? The Guardian are completely delusional. And you know what, I can't be bothered to read the final bit there, it's a load of nonsense. You get the gist of this. It is Brexit derangement syndrome gone mad, mixed in with a little bit of bat flu to give it some weight in their opinion. But to most of the country, they just don't care, and to anyone with half a brain cell, staying in the EU is obviously not going to be a good situation, considering what is happening at the moment in relation to the coronavirus and the economic damage that it's causing. Take a look at the EU now. They're arguing amongst themselves about who is going to pay for the debt after all this is done. If we remain in the EU, we're paying a big chunk of that. You better believe it. So The Guardian, why don't you move yourself over to the EU and promote their bullshit over there? Because we don't care. Now before I go, I've started doing live streams and uploading gaming content on my second channel. If you would like to come and join me for a live stream to chat in real time, have an interest in gaming related content on YouTube, or just want to follow me over there because you are a legend, the link will be down in the video description below and as a pinned comment. I hope to see you all there. Now as always, before I go, I want to thank our PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar and YouTube members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next one.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. and it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going and we are glad to be going. We're off.